See you, Chad. See you next week. You can hang out if you want. That's true. OK, let's review a little bit. What is a state?
Current condition.
Yes, it describes the current condition of an object, right? What's a state machine?
State machine is a cycle of the condition.
It describes how you go from state to state. Let's just put it that way, right? It's like it describes you how to change from one state to another. Light, I talked about the light switch, right? Do you guys understand? In Playmaker, which I'm going to load up right now, there's a concept of states, a state machine, and then there's two more things called events and transitions. Let me go over those. I think those are important too. We're going to do I'm going to do two things. One is a chest that opens and closes via an animation, and one is a how to display time in your game. Okay? You're going to need to know how to display time in your game because that's going to be the homework. You're going to make a race. You're going to make a foot race. It's basically an obstacle course. You can go as crazy with it as you want. You can go as simple with it as you want. But the key is that you need to show how much time is left. OK, so Playmaker. This is Playmaker. Create an empty object. Playmaker FSM. So as I described, a state is a description of what an object is currently doing. So a light switch is either on. So if I do a light switch, light is on. You can also have a state for light is off. States describe what an object is doing at that time. And as far as Playmaker is concerned, your state machine can only be in one state at a time. Okay? Light is on or light is off. It cannot be in both at the same time. A state machine describes how one state goes to another. All right? A state machine is basically a collection of states and how they change from one state to another. Playmaker uses states along with transitions to describe a state machine. What is a transition? Transitions are things like this. You add a transition by right-clicking on a state in Playmaker and choosing to add a transition from the list here. Transitions can be built in, which are things like finished. There's also a bunch of system transitions here. You connect transitions to other states by just dragging a line from one transition to a state. If you want to, you can add your own custom transitions. What is a transition again? It's basically a way to show you how a state goes from one thing to another. States can have custom transitions by adding events. So remember the Events tab? An event is something that happened, right? Light was turned off is a description of something that happened. When you add an event to Playmaker, it shows up in your transitions list as something you can add. Notice that a state can have multiple transitions. OK? I have a finished transition, and I have a light was turned off transition. Both of those things are hooked up to events. Okay, that's the review. Just for you guys, just for my sake, I'm going to have you guys do a lab right now. It's going to take about half an hour or so. But I want to make sure that everyone understands how states and transitions work. I want you guys to start off by making a button in Playmaker that plays a sound. Okay? When you click on it. That's it. So make a button in Playmaker that you can click to play a sound. Everyone. Diana, you too. If you're not sure even where to start, raise your hand. I'll come help you. Okay, come help you. If you know where to start, go ahead and start, and we'll pick up when you guys are done. So just a single button plays a single sound when you click on it. Use Playmaker. this in this level? Sure.
Huh?
Okay, so if you want to have something that plays a sound, let's put a Playmaker on something so we can put some this cube, I guess. This seems good. We could also put it on like the camera or something like that. So let's start by find your camera in this part. That one. So go ahead and add a component to it. Remember how to have a button show up on screen? So remember there's one state that it's empty right now, so how do you add actions? And how do you add button? Or do you add button? Cool. Notice how this thing turned like kind of dark, right? Remember that you can adjust the width and height of that thing, which I would recommend doing. And, that's from 0 to 1 is, you know, you make it 2 and then 5. You know, so it shrunk it. So behind this editor window is that button. And you can put some text in there. Cool. So what we want to do is we want that button to do something. When you click on it, when you play sound, right? Let's start off by finding a sound you can make. I recommend open up a web browser. I really like using GA3331. It's like an automatic sound generator. You can use anything really. You can have play music if you want. You click on it. But I recommend GA3331. You can just Google that. Sound effects.
It's not .com, is it?
No, it's VFXR.net. Cool. So these are some presets here that are useful. Every time you click on it, it'll generate a new sound. Seems good, right? So if you do that 4 ways, maybe save it to your desktop or downloads. Yeah. Now, what you want to do is you want to add that sound to your Unity project. You remember how to do that? You can just drag and drop the sound to your folders here. So if you find the sound in Windows, on your desktop, you just drag that sound to here. It'll add it. Cool. So check here for yourself. Okay, so that works, right? So go back to your camera. There's your button. So remember how we set it up so that when you click the button, we wanted something to happen. The light is turning on and off. Yeah, so you want to add a new event. That's a click. And then go back to your setup. That checkbox, don't worry about it for now. You can click it or not. It doesn't matter for you. So go to send event. There you go. This is what's going to happen. Cool. Now you're going to need to add another state. So add a new state. And I want you to add transition from state 1 to state 2. Right click on state 1 in your big browser. And I want you to add a transition from state 1 to state 2. So right click on that state. One click. And I want you to connect that transition to state 2. And then in state 2, this is where I want you to place it. So go to the action browser and search for like sound. You find something that's related. And maybe not play random sound, just play sound. Looks like you added play random sound. So just you can do that, or if you want to delete it, you can put a little column, a little ears, and do move. Cool. And if you want to take an audio clip, you can either drag that audio clip into there, or if I find it easy, then you do it. And that's it. So play. And you can play your game now. Cool. Now, can you set it up so that you can click on it multiple times? So you want to add a transition from state 2 to state 1, so you want to go back to the state. How do you do that? I think in this case, you can just right-click on state 2. Add a transition. like you finish. Finish is a special one that says, hey, I'm done doing whatever I need to do. Now you can connect state 2 to state 1. Let's click on the actual light create button. Hit finish mode. Now play. See, you can click. This button doesn't go away because it goes like this. See how it goes from position. So can you add a second button that plays different stuff? Can you try to do that? Go around and see how it goes. You guys all done? With the button stuff? What are you guys doing on this?
Just stupid.
Attached to it.
What the heck? What does that even say? I wanted to just name it, but then it's like, oh, there you go.
Oh, I see. That multiple line.
Yeah, I was like,
So you look like you're on the right path. So let's add a. Do you remember how to add a button to be shown on screen for the light switch? Okay, so you have a state. Currently it doesn't do anything. Right? There's nothing there. So let's first start off with adding a button. So go to the action browser. There's a little button there. And I would just search for button. That's like that's the one GUI button. So notice when you added that, click here, it's all dark. So put some text here. There's some text. And, this is going to be the text that's on the button. Maybe play sound or something, probably, right? Cool. You can change the width and height. It's probably something you want to do, because right now it's the full screen. Okay, cool. So that's more reasonable. So now we want this thing to do something. So right now, this is the only state you have. This state is responsible for drawing the button. We need to make a different state that plays the sound. So add a new state. Cool. So we need to connect these two states. We need to make it so when you click a button, you go from here to here. Okay? So we start, right, so if you want to add a transition, you need to first add an event. So you go here, see how there's an events tab here? So you can add an event here describing, like, hey, click the button. So why don't you go ahead and add it? Who knows? Just call it click. Cool. So now when you right click on this thing, see it says click? So go ahead and add it. You need to do one more thing. Go to your button here. See how it says send event? That's the button asking, what do you want me to do when I'm clicking? And now I want you to connect that transition to state 1. You have to click on that part. You can't click on the edge, click on the actual light part. Yeah. And then connect it to state 1. Cool. So go to state 1. And now this state is blank, right? So let's add something that lets it play a sound. So if you search here for sound, there's two. I think you want to play sound in this case. There's play random sound, which is not really helpful. Play sound, but only there. Okay. So you can add that. And now it's just going to ask you for an audio clip. So go ahead and, do you have an audio clip already?
No.
Let's go make one in VFXR. So go open a web browser up. And open up VFXR. You can just Google that. VFXR. Yeah. That's the Let's enable sound. Okay. And then pick one of these sounds to generate audio. Maybe we turn down the Okay. So every time you click on it, it generates a variation of the sound. So whichever one you So you do export load. Save it to your desktop. That's fine. So now I want you to open up a Windows folder to your desktop. So go to your any of these folders. Desktop. So just click and drag this to your assets folder. Here, where is it? So click here. Move this down.
Playmaker component that you're editing, where did you have that? Which one of these objects have to do? Okay, look, it's one of these two that have the synchronized. This one. So go ahead and add that sound to state number 1. This is the one I have to place on that, right? Go ahead and add that sound so you can click and drag that here, or you can click the signal, your choice. Yep. And that one will bring up the dialog box with the sound. Just double click on it. Now I want you to just play it. Go ahead and play. And I want you to watch this while you click on that. Changing the something. Now let's set it up so that you can click on it multiple times. Because right now it's stuck in the state and never goes back. Notice there's no button anymore because it's in the doesn't have a button. But what we can do is just say, hey, when you're done playing the sound, just go back, restart state. Okay, so let's stop playing. So in state 1, I want you to right click and add another new transition. Finish this thing. This will automatically fire whenever this state is done doing all of that. And then I want you to connect finish to turn something. Don't click the edge, just click the white part. You don't actually have to click the edge at all, you can just click any part of that. Cool. Okay. Can you set it up to have 2 buttons that play 2 different sounds? So keep this button there, and I want you to have another one that plays a different sound.
So 2 buttons.
2 buttons, each one plays a different sound. Gotcha, boss.
It's so annoying.
And what?
I can just like stand it.
Okay, so what do you got here? So I want you to add 2 things. I want you to be able to click the button multiple times to play the same sound. So why don't we do that first? Can you make this state set up so every time you can click the button more than once? An unlimited number of times? So right now it's, when you click, it goes to here, right? And then it stays there. You add a finish transition. Yep. You play, and then that should let you click it multiple times. So go ahead and test it. You got to jump. Where's your trigger? Did you set up a trigger for this? Stop. Show me that. There's nothing in here.
It's one
So I want you to
box.
set up a button to do this. So you need to add a GUI button here. So search for a
It's one
button.
per box. It's 'cause you
Make
create 2
this
boxes.
thing bigger. You can only see one thing. Make it taller. Yeah. Yeah. You want GUI button. So see how this thing got dark now? The background. Okay, so go to this state. Add some text here. Yep, and then maybe change the width and height. The width and height too. So that's the position, but the width and height is the size of the button. So make that something smaller than 1. This is, yeah, so 0.5 will be half the screen. That'll be how big the button is. Like maybe 0.1, yeah, that seems good. And the height too, you want to change that. Yep, cool. Now you have a reasonably sized button, okay? The only thing left to do is the button is asking for what event you want to send when you click on it. So do you click the button? Yep. Now play. Now you should see this button still stay here. You should be able to click on it. Go ahead and click on this button.
What's that sound website called?
See how it changed? The
I just
landscape?
want this re-download.
But you don't have a play sound action in this state yet. So let's add that next. So stop playing, and then go to that state. Oh, you do have a play sound actually. Is your volume really low? Oh, you have headphones. Okay, can you test it? Do you hear it? Maybe your volume's super low.
That's right. I can hear.
Can you hear?
Yeah.
Okay. So you have one button set up. I want you to set up a second button that also plays a sound, a different sound.
How
Okay.
do you stop the sound?
How do you stop it?
Mm.
The sound will automatically stop when it's done.
Okay.
So if you have a really long sound, it won't stop. You can stop sound if you want to automatically. There's a stop sound action, but pick a shorter sound. All right, who's having trouble with the 2-button thing?
Well, I thought I had the first button thing now, but what I realized was it was just doing it no matter where I clicked. It was making the noise. It had nothing to do with.
Oh yeah, it's not get button down. You want GUI button.
GUI button. Okay, because I had.
Get button down will happen anytime that you click. But GUI
I
button.
had get mouse button down and then get button down, and both of them were not working.
Yeah, you want a button that's actually visible on screen.
So
get rid of those other button actions that you had.
Does it matter if the FSM is on different objects?
No, actually it doesn't.
Okay, cool. Good.
Yeah, it'll run both.
They're on walls.
They're on walls, that's fine. You can just doing this. You can do this in a test level. You don't have to do this in your actual physical maze, but it's fine. Yeah, you have GUI buttons, nice section there. The important thing is that event, yeah, so width, that's up. And then width and height, you can make that something that's not uploaded to different. Okay. Let me just show you guys how to do the 2-button thing up here. Because I'll show you the way that, there are many ways you can set it up, but there's the one way that I would set it up, just for the sake of time. So if anyone doesn't have it yet, let me show you what we got. So everyone should have had 2 states. I'm going to name this one show button. And this one is going to be called like play sound. Show button is going to have a single action. It's going to have a GUI button. And I hate this viewport configuration. Okay. It's going to have a GUI button. Do not show me this at startup anymore. So here, text is going to be play sound. And make this thing like 0.2 and 0.1. I'm going to add an event. Rename this one called clicked button. And click button is going to go here, which is going to let me play sound. And I'm going to just drag my, I don't have an audio clip. Oh, that's a shame. I like that one. I'm going to use that one. The what sound effect? Oh yeah, Inception sound. I'm downloading this Inception sound 2.wave. I don't want to download. That's a terrible version of that. Who does this?
Do you want to take a...
Where's the thingy? I'm probably spending way too much time on this. This is important. Oh, boo. All right, I give up. Cannot do Inception sound. We're going to make it in BFXR instead. This thing is always way too loud. That's okay. Whatever. We're going to use that. No, that's bad. Okay. I'm going to have a power-up sound, save it to my desktop. And let's go here. So there's my power-up sound. There's my Unity folder. Take my power-up sound and drag it into my Unity folder. Go back to my Playmaker state and play the sound. I showed some of you guys the finish transition. This is a special built-in transition in Playmaker that fires when all the actions in your state are complete. Okay. There are times when this doesn't fire, but in this case it'll fire when it's done playing the sound. Doesn't mean when the sound is finished, it just means when it's triggered the sound. Okay? So, what if I want to add a second button? Okay? I have the 1 here. If I want to add a second button that plays a second sound, go to my action browser. I'm just going to add another GUI button to that same state. Call this one play other sound. I'm going to keep it 0.2, 0.1. I'm going to move it down a little bit, like so. So I have 2 GUI button actions in the same state, which you can do. The key is that you need to have a second event for that second button. I'm going to call it clicked other button. You have to have 2 events because you need to distinguish between the first button and the second button. So I go back to my state. I have a second GUI button action here. I'm going to send clicked other button. Notice my first button just says clicked button, and the other one is clicked other button. Now when I right-click on my state, I can add a new transition called clicked other button. Where is this guy going to go? I need to make a new state for my second sound. I'm going to make another play other sound. It also we'll just call play sound. That'll be good. Make a jump sound. Desktop, Unity. Drag my jump sound into my Unity workflow here. Go back to here. I'm going to play my jump sound now. Now when I click the other button, this is going to go here. And I'm also going to add a finish transition here. So your state will look something like this. Maybe it can look something like this too. It doesn't really matter how that thing looks. The key is that you have 2 transitions out of the same state. And now when I play, there's 2 buttons that show up. And depending on the button that I clicked, it goes to different states. All right? 3 states total.
How do you get that second transition? I'm going to add in a different one and just replace it.
You have to add a new event. So you have to have, look at my events list. I have click button and I've clicked other button. Make sure you have 2 separate events for that. Then it should show up when you right-click on that transition. Don't right-click on the transition. Right-click on the state and do add transition there. Yeah, so it'll add another one. Okay. We're going to do one more lab with sounds, but this time without buttons. I feel like you guys need a little bit more practice with this stuff, so let's spend a little bit more time here before we jump into anything else, all right? Okay, so that was the button example. Now I want you guys to hook up things to the keyboard. We haven't done that yet, but Unity and Playmaker are really good at handling keyboard and mouse input, okay? Because it's pretty rare that you have like buttons that do shit in your game unless you're like implementing a store or like main menus and stuff. Usually a lot of your stuff is bound to input from the keyboard or input from 360 controllers. Unity also has built-in support for that. So if you plug in a 360 controller, you can also have it bound to that. Okay, so wherever you're at with your sound stuff, we're going to make a new object that does things based on keyboard pressing, okay? So in your scene, I want everyone to make just a blank, empty object, all right? Just a brand new empty object. I'm going to rename this object. Remember I talked about naming conventions last week. GO for game object _ keyboard manager. I name it keyboard manager because this is where I'm going to be handling all kinds of input from the keyboard. It doesn't actually do much in my scene. It's empty, doesn't have anything special. But it's an empty guy here. So I'm going to add a Playmaker FSM to this guy here. So add a Playmaker FSM and go to your editor for that guy. You'll see something like this. State 1, blank start state. Okay? So let's set it up so when I hit spacebar in this state machine that it plays a sound. All right? We're using sounds. It's just a really easy audio way to tell that you're doing something correct. All right? So yeah, I have this state. I'm going to rename this state waiting for spacebar. You could also name it something like waiting for input or waiting for keyboard press. I'm just naming it waiting for spacebar for now. It's very specific. If you go to the action browser and you search for get key, 2 words, get key, you'll find 3 actions. One that's pressed, one action that gets fired to tell you the current state of the key. We're not going to use that here. There's one here that tells you when the person presses the key, and another one that tells you when the person releases the key. All right? These 2 are important because depending on what you're doing in your game, you want one or the other, right? What are cases that pressing key down is when you want? Like jumping in your game. When the user presses spacebar, that's when you want them to jump, right? What about when the user releases a key? How about like a bow and arrow in your game, right? You want, let's say, as long as the user or the player is holding down the left mouse button, don't shoot. But as soon as you let go of the left mouse button, that's when you fire, right? Those are 2 kind of common cases of when you would use get key down versus get key up. In our case, you can use either. I'm going to use get key down. It's just easier. So add one of those actions to your state. There's only really 2 dialog boxes we need to care about. One is the key dialog box. So go ahead and click on that. And you're going to get presented with a huge list of every single keyboard key that Unity handles. Okay? You're going to need to either scroll to find spacebar, or a trick is that you can type in a letter. Like if I'm searching for spacebar, I can hit S, and it will jump to the first occurrence of a key that starts with S. And every time I hit S after that, it will go to the next line, next thing that matches it.
You said right-click on the get key down?
Right-click on it? You can do spacebar. I'm using spacebar here, so I just use space.
Oh, I meant like you get the list.
Oh, just left-click on the key thing here. There's a drop-down box here.
Oh, it's get key.
Yeah. What'd you say, Kai?
How do you go to the keyboard and management?
I just clicked on it. Did you add a Playmaker FSM? Yeah. Get key down.
Get key down.
Buttons are controllers, controller inputs, which is not what you want here.
How do you add it?
Add a Playmaker FSM. Add component, Playmaker, Playmaker FSM. You've done this already, I'm pretty sure, because you had to do this for your light.
It said delete Playmaker UI.
No, Playmaker FSM.
No, it asked me to delete something.
Delete something? No.
Playmaker UI.
If I add the GUI,
Yeah, you don't want to add the Playmaker GUI. Those get added automatically. They should actually not be getting added to your thing. Yeah. Don't have that. Click on the little gear next to that. And edit component. And then edit this thing. Yeah. Click on the edit button. Yeah, so bring this up. Yeah, go to that state. And then add that. Get key down. All All right. Get key down is going to handle spacebar in this case. All right. It also handles up, down, left, right, numpad, F1, F12, any key that's on the keyboard. There is a key here corresponding to that. All right. I'm not actually sure what it does for Mac key.
It was Mac keys.
I think it's just an option.
It said whatever they say instead of app. Listed it on here as an option.
Yeah. Okay, we're going to just use spacebar here. Just like what we did for the button, we need to add an event that lets us add a transition. So go to the Events tab, add a new event, which is like spacebar pressed, or whatever button you have pressed. You can name this anything. You can name this Joe or like Billy if you want.
Probably should.
Yeah, I'm going to recommend that you name this something related to the transition you want to fire. So in this case, I'm going to say spacebar pressed. Once you've added this event, go back to your state and choose that event here in this drop-down box. Okay. This is the most commonly forgotten about step, the send event. When I pick this, it shows me a little error that says, hey, this event that you added is not used anywhere in your state machine. Are you sure that this is the thing that you wanted? And I'm sure. I just need to add the transition. All right, so go to your state, add a transition for spacebar pressed. And now it's just like the button that we had set up. We want to add a new state. This new state that we're going to add is going to be responsible for playing the sound. Play sound. When spacebar is pressed, we're going to play a sound. So we're going to transition from waiting for spacebar to playing a sound. All right. Play sound by default has no actions in it. We're going to add an action for play sound, just like what we did for the button. So I just want you to add the same thing that you did for the button. We're going to do here. And I'm going to plug in a sound here. And just like what we did for the button, I want to be able to press spacebar multiple times. So add another transition to this play sound state so you can keep pressing spacebar. Add the finish transition here and connect that back to the first state. All right. Now if you set this up, every time you hit spacebar now, it will change states and it should play a sound too. Once you're done playing a single sound, I want you guys to add keyboard handling for at least 2 keys. If you have time, do more to play multiple sounds. Looks good, but you don't need to play sound action in this state. You want it in that state. And then you want to make sure it has a hardware connected. So then connect your transition. So whichever one you get, pick the space. Cool. And then make sure you can go back to that. So add another transition to that one. So right click on that one and do finish. Use the one you want. Cool. Now try this in the, make sure when you press space that it plays a sound. You hear something when you press your button. So while it's running, I want you to click on this state machine box. So go back to your game now. So it's going in. What sound are you playing in state 1? Oh, you know what it is? It's playing the sound from wherever this object is. Which means that wherever you put this object, it's not following the player. So let me show you how to fix this. So go ahead and you can put it
balls to play around wherever they go. And it's just like a little puppy that plays the sound for you every time you hit spacebar. But it looks like you have to set up. You set up the exit Z to play 2 other sounds now. What about you guys? How are you guys doing on this keyboard stuff? Save it as a wave file. I'll save it as a VFXR send. I don't know why it's doing that actually. Cool. Can you set up like other keys, like up, down, left, right, or yeah.
Can I first press the play button? It'll take 1 second.
Oh, because look at your first state. Look at this state here. Look at the actions that you're doing.
Don't wait for it.
Well, you don't want to play sound here. You don't need this to play sound.
I don't need
Yeah. You only want it in this state.
Oh, okay, so I just.
Cool. Yeah, that's how it should be set up. So you have wave files. You click on that accidentally, and that button, and then you gotta select your sound that way. Click on a little circle, yeah, that way. Save it as a wave file. And do that file. Yeah, then you get to drag them back into your view. Yep. These ones too, I guess? Is that what you want?
Oh, yeah, that's one.
Cool. What about the rest of you guys? Just good. You do. Oh, nice. You got the keyboard. Yeah, that's basically the idea. We're gonna use this behavior for keyboard pressing for controlling a character in our game. All right? Because up,
WASD?
down, yeah, WASD, up, down, left, right are gonna be used to drive forward, left, back, right. Right now we're just playing a sound on each of the key presses. Can you set up 2 different sounds, not just the same sound for every key? So add 2 more states just like that. Let's play a sound each.
So in every like platformer game where they make the character make a sound when they jump, it not only controls space controlled jump, but it also has
At the
an
same time,
extra
add more.
sound.
Yeah, so
added
in
to
this
it.
case, what you could do is in the sound state, instead of just playing a sound,
It
you would have
also-
2 actions in there.
You just see
A
sound.
play sound actions and a hey, tell the character to jump.
Jump. Mhm.
Yeah, so you can stack actions on these.
So just it would be like
There isn't a jump thing. There's a character mover move, like controller move. Yeah. So you would add that and tell it to move up, which you need to click on the little guy over there, and then you can have it move up and Y. So Y is up. How you guys holding up? Questions? You didn't cover.
oh my god.
Forgot the 2 buttons.
All right, nice.
Where did
Yeah,
they
this is
go?
we're gonna get into more. There's a lot of stuff to cover, but I don't think I'm gonna get to any of this stuff today. But I'll get to some of the. I'll get to a little bit of the triggers. We're gonna have to review triggers too, and then we can show you guys labels. What'd you do?
When I clicked to make a move now, like, cause it said I had to add a character controller,
Yeah, yeah.
so I did. But now whenever I click this, it
What did you add? You added it to the plane? Oh yeah, that'll do it.
flies upwards.
It'll land eventually. It'll land eventually.
Put that down.
If you pause and then click on your little guy that you scripted, so double click on the game object, you'll see where he is in the sky. So yeah, there he is.
Oh god. Where did oh my god,
So
15's really high.
So unpause, and then double click on your guy again, or hit F, and we'll focus on it. Oh. Yeah, he's probably up in the sky. That's cool. Oh, that's a good idea. I'll show you a little bit more scripting stuff. Alright, are you guys ready to move on to another review set? Any questions on this? This was the basis of the keyboard input. Let's review triggers. I feel like we're going to need to do that too. You guys remember what triggers are?
from last week? Triggers are volumes that when something enters that volume, something else happens. All right. Triggers are used like one of the most common things in game development and gameplay are triggers. Games are built and destroyed on the concept of doing triggers properly, right? Triggers are used for games like in wave spawning or triggering cinematics. I'm sure you guys have thousands of triggers, or the equivalent of triggers. They don't always call them triggers, but sometimes, most of the time, they call them triggers. We use triggers for everything. So let's do triggers. Remember, they're used in games by placing them in a level. In Unity, you can define a trigger to be any of the shapes that are built in. You can also define triggers to be pretty much any shape of any mesh that you create. So the first thing I'm going to have you guys do, with my help, is make a trigger that shows a button as long as you're inside that trigger. So while you're inside the trigger, it shows a button. But when you're outside the trigger, it doesn't show the button, right? So you can think of this as like an NPC interaction. Like, oh, I walked up to an NPC. There's like a prompt to press A and interact. Or like a treasure chest says, hey, walk up to the treasure chest. Press A to interact with this treasure chest, right? It's the same idea. We're going to do this in here. Okay, questions on that?
No.
You guys ready?
Yes.
All right, me too. All right, so let's do this in you can do this in your level. You're going to need a character controller, so either a first-person controller or a third-person controller. If you don't remember how to add those, just watch up here. Go to your project and right-click and do Import Package. Make sure you select Character Controller here. This will give you a first and a third-person controller, which you can drop into your game. So import a Character Controller package. Cool. So I imported the character controller package, and I have a new folder called Standard Assets. Within it, there are several new assets that I can use, a first-person controller and a third-person controller. In my case, I'm going to use the first-person controller. I need to drag him into my level. I don't really have a floor or anything yet, so let's take care of that. I'll add a floor, scale this guy up. I'm also going to add a light. Cool. I'm also going to add a cube that shows me where my switch is. There's my cube. It's kind of bright. Let's change the color of this cube. I'm going to make a new material, just so I can set the color. Put that on my little platform there. So there's my platform where I'm going to put my trigger. Let's just first start off by putting a first-person controller in my level and make sure that that works. Make sure everyone can run around as a first-person controller. I mean, if you have your maze already, this should already be set up for you. Does everyone have a first-person controller running around in their level? Johnny, you okay?
He's freaking me out by the fact that he does not stop.
Oh, that's the third-person controller. That's a pile of shit. So I wouldn't use that. I don't know. I don't like that thing. It
He really creeps me out.
It's because his idle animation is wrong, and it's been wrong for a long time. So yeah. So there's my platform where my trigger is going to live, right? That isn't my trigger. That's just a cube. Okay? Let's fix that by actually adding a trigger. So triggers are usually cube or cylindrical shaped, depending on what you want. We're going to use a cube. So go ahead and add a brand new cube. Position this cube appropriately so it's actually like over your thing to designate what is going to be a trigger. So I position it's like on top of this thing. All right. This is actually a physical cube right now. If I play my level, I cannot walk into this thing. I can physically jump on top of this thing. That's not what I want for my trigger. I don't want to be blocked by it. So let's fix that. So I select my cube. I'm going to rename this cube right now So don't forget, call it GO_trigger. Because if I don't, I'm not going to be able to tell which cube is the trigger and which cube is the cube that's underneath the trigger. For my trigger, you're going to disable the mesh renderer by clicking the checkbox there. This hides it. It does not disable the collision. So disable the mesh renderer, and make sure you enable trigger here. Okay? This will turn this into something that collides with the player. So enable this checkbox there to something that doesn't block the player, but still detects collision. Okay? And for the sake of making this something reasonable, I'm just going to scale everything up a little bit. I really. Okay, so now my trigger is decently sized. All right, everyone got this so far? You have a trigger that you can walk through. That's key. And make sure you have not disabled box collider, okay? Don't do this. Don't do this shit. Just keep it on, but just turn on the trigger, all right? Cool. Let's add a Playmaker FSM to this guy. This guy's going to be responsible for showing a button when a player is inside of it, okay? So we're going to add a Playmaker FSM. And edit this guy. And this should start looking familiar now. Brand new FSMs in Playmaker always have one state called state 1 and nothing else. Right? How many states do you guys think we need to control whether we show a button or not? 2 sounds like the right number to me, too. What do you think those states are going to be called?
Shown, visible, and invisible.
OK, we can do that. I'm going to actually name them player is inside.
Okay.
Well, let's name this one player is outside first. We'll add another state called player is inside. I was going to put players inside me, but that's not right. All right.
Wrong hole.
Players outside, players inside. OK? There's 2 states. We start with the player outside of our trigger. Okay? What is the action we need to add to handle trigger events? Well, if I type trigger, I get these 2 actions. This trigger event action is the one that I need. So go ahead and add a trigger event action to your state machine. So the properties of the trigger event are, first, it's a drop-down box asking what events should I respond to. So as long as the player is outside, we want to track as soon as he enters the trigger. So this is the one we want. The default behavior is correct. Collision tag, leave this alone unless you've changed the tag on the player. I'm going to leave it untagged. And send event, this is going to be the transition that we really want to fire when the player enters the trigger. Okay? So why don't we go to the Events tab. We're going to add 2 events. What are the 2 events that can happen in our state machine for this trigger? What are the 2 things that can happen?
Button is show.
Player entered is 1. And then what's another one? Player exited. Right? Those are 2 things that can happen in this state machine. The player can walk into our trigger, so the player can enter our trigger, and the player can walk out of the trigger. There's nothing in between, right? There's no player is it's either in or out. There's no like I'm neither. Right? Those are the 2 total things that can happen inside the world of this trigger, all right? So go back to your state after you've added those 2 events. Diana, you got this? Just want to make sure you're following along, too. Okay. Everyone else got this? Brianna, you good? Player entered, player left? Johnny? Everyone? OK. So we're we're going to send the event. Which of these events are we going to send? Player entered or player exited? Player entered, right? All right. So player entered. Now we need to connect these two states together. So add a transition, player entered, and connect that to this state. All right. So let's just test this right now before we do anything else. All right. We have a two-state state machine with one transition that happens when you trigger. So go ahead and play once you have this set up. And watch your state machine and make sure that as soon as you step in, it transitions to that new state. All right. Everyone's working like this? You good? Okay. If anyone's not working, let me know. You should all be good. Because it's easy to screw this up, so I understand. Okay. Yeah, just double check that your state looks like that. Like you actually fired your send event. See your send event over there? It's empty. It's blank on that action. It's the most common thing. Every single class, it's bar none. Everyone screws this up. Even I screw this up all the time. You always forget to fill this thing out. This thing, you do everything else correctly, but you always forget this guy here. Every time, guaranteed. One person always does that. And it's usually me, but like, been getting better at it. Did you get it? Everyone got it? Cool.
Here's your player. Go to your trigger. Make it the sound. No, it's not. Oh, yeah. Like, just click on the trigger. Yeah, get rid of that. That's what she said. Well.
I already said not to you, so.
I specified if not me, then you.
Go ahead and step over. It works.
All right, so everyone's got it working. So let's set it up so that when you leave the trigger, that it goes back to the first state. Because right now, if I enter this trigger, look at my state machine. It goes in, stays there. When I leave, nothing happens, right? So let's set it up so when you leave, it changes states again. So as you can guess, leaving the trigger is almost identical to entering the trigger. We're still going to use a trigger event here, right? Let me get my microphone set up. So leaving the trigger is going to use the same action. So go to your state while the player is inside. Go to your action browser and add another trigger event here. All right? So this trigger event goes into the second state that you made, the player's inside. All right? The trigger this time, though, is not when you enter, it's when you exit. So make sure you change this drop-down box to be on trigger exit. All right?
Do we have a button on player stay?
On inside. Yeah. Not on player. I'm going to get to that. We don't need that on player stay event. So the trigger is this. What event are you going to send when the player exits? It's going to be player exited. Okay? And then you're going to add a transition for that and connect that transition back. All right? Just like what you did for all the other buttons. So player exited. Now test it. Go into your level. And make sure as you go in and out of your trigger volume that your state machine goes in and out of outside and inside. Okay? Does anyone not have this yet? I will come help me. Kelvin, you good? Cool. What is that? What is that picture of?
It's a suspension connection, and then
Oh.
apparently water can get in through there.
Is that for the FRS?
Yeah.
That seems like really minor thing.
It starts molding and then
Oh,
rusting.
weird? That's weird. Crazy. It doesn't rain ever here, so no problem.
It sends a little bit of water. It doesn't even have to rain.
Really?
Moisture on the road will condense
What?
into there.
That's crazy. All right, so players outside, players inside. Everyone got this? For those of you guys that are ahead already, just go ahead and add a button where you think is appropriate to show while the player's inside the trigger. I'll do that next with you. You have player exited here, right? So on trigger exit here. Yes, sir. don't need a new state for this. You can use two states. So if I want to show a button only while the player's inside the trigger volume, how do I determine if the player's inside the trigger? I already know that, right? Like I already have, like yeah, the state already shows that, right? This state is only alive when the player is inside the trigger, which means if I put behavior in here, in this state, it will only run when the player is inside. So let's just go to this state and add a button here. GUI button. I'm going to put some text here, like, hey, press A to interact, or something. I'm going to put it kind of in the middle of the screen, like so. And that's it. I don't want this button to do anything. I just want you guys to show a button. So we're not going to get to that quite yet. So now when I play, after you set up the button, when I'm inside the volume, there's a button that shows up that I can click that doesn't do anything. And when I leave, the button goes away automatically.
Why does it go away automatically? Because mine is still stuck on my screen after I walk out.
So you need to make sure that that button only is here in the player's inside state.
But, yes.
So you're still in the player's inside state. It still thinks you're inside the volume. Why did it not leave that volume? Where did your trigger event go?
Trigger event. You good, bro? Oh, you good? I mean, like, what it's saying is like when you're inside here, that's only when the button shows up, right? Yeah. So you gotta put that blue button in the state that is inside. So I put it like inside.
Yeah, so check it out. Go ahead. Here, it's easier to just play it. Go ahead and play it. Yeah, play it. Walk into that thing. See how you enter that state? Oh, you already have it.
It's just your buttons you use.
Yeah, your buttons are you did it right. Like that. This button. So go ahead and walk out of the state. So watch. You see this thing? How it's changing? Can you make this thing bigger? Can you make that taller? And just walk in and out of that trigger. Just want to show you. Walk in, walk, and see how you're there. Walk out, see how you're there. So why does the button go away? Which is the correct thing to do. Why does the button go away when you're not in there? Not in there? Yeah. Well, when is the button told to show up, right? Only when you're in this state, right? This button only works while you're in that state, which means that when you're in any other state, none of these things happen, right? That's the power of state machines, right? You can put anything in here, anything at all, but it will only run when you're inside the trigger volume, right? And vice versa. If you put something in the outside state, it will only run when you're standing outside the trigger, right? Like it's raining, right? Maybe you have a particle effect that shows rain while you're outside of a trigger volume. And when you're inside of a house, maybe it turns off. Okay? Does that make sense? Okay, so here's what I want you guys to do. This is a bit of a challenge. Not too much of a challenge, but it's a little bit of a challenge. I want you guys to make this button play a sound. So when you click on it, I want you to make it play a sound. It's like a combination of what you just did. So while you're inside the trigger volume, I want you to be able to click on this button and have it play a sound. Right?
I got a quick question.
Yeah.
I like playing with this GUI skin thing right now. I know it's gonna change later.
Yeah, I showed it to you last week.
But like, I don't know if I'm doing it right, but like, I took this freaking font, right?
Yeah.
Put it into
Your skin.
this skin, and then every time like I would change the size of it, it always seems like it stays the same size.
Are you sure you're using this skin? Oh, you're using it on the label. Are you showing a label or a button? Because you have to edit the button properties up here.
Son of a biscuit.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's a box. That's not the same thing.
Oh.
Button.
Yeah, I can't. It's spelled almost the same.
So yeah, change the font size here, and then I'll
Okay.
change it.
Man, hard time moment. Thank you much.
Yeah, it's every single property. All right, so you guys got it. Oh, get in the trigger and press the button causes the sound to play. It's just like walk up to NPC or walk up to treasure chest, push a button, pull chest open. Okay? You have to add a third state. So if you're confused, you have to add 3 states to your state machine. Yeah, total. So add a third state, so start with that, and have your button go back and forth between that state. And then we'll do one thing and we'll call it. Hi, how you doing? You getting the button set up? I want you guys to try to like figure it out because like this is key. You need 3 states. So yeah, you got it, Johnny. Ramon, you got it. Add one state. This state. Remember how you did the button before for playing the sound? It's very similar to that. So this state is going to be responsible for playing the sound. You got it, Sam?
Yes.
Cool. Don't break your existing stuff. You don't need to break anything. You do need to add a new transition. So your stage should have 2 transitions. Can you still leave your volume? So yeah,
I accidentally put it down.
oh yeah, you want to add a second. You want to have 2 transitions here. So
Yeah.
you should have 3 there. Be careful that you don't. If you right click on the transition, it'll give you options to like replace it. That's not what you want. So make sure you click on the top state. That will give you the chance to add a new one. Yeah, that looks good. Looks better. Except playing the sound, you don't need a button here. You just need to have it play sound in this state. Yeah, delete this guy. Delete this button. Go ahead and add a new action in this state, which is playing this. So how do you get from this to here? Right now, look at the way the lines are going, right? So starting here, players outside can go into here. This can go up here, right? But there's no way for this to go to here. So you add a new transition that goes from here to here. So we'll have to add another one here. Go ahead and add a transition to player who's inside. Oh, you don't have one for click the button. Oh, sound, you have one. Use that one. So that one, you'll need to have it connect down here, right? And then make sure you remember that GUI button when you click on it here, set. And then this one here, this state, which goes from here to here, how you go from here back to here. What causes you to go from here? What's that line? Is it player enter? Yeah. So what causes player enter to fire? Looks like nothing here. I would change that to be finished instead, because that will automatically fire when you're done playing the sound. Change that transition event to finish. And that's it. So now when you click, it'll go down to here, play the sound, finish, and go right back. To let you keep clicking the button. Go ahead and click. You can go in there and actually. So click the button. Oh, you can just click with your mouse. It's a huge button that covers the entire screen.
Yeah, look at that. Oh, it's the same color.
So just click anywhere with the mouse.
Oh. Oh, that's pretty cool.
See how watch the state? So we'll click. Get those in there for a second. So answer me this: why does it play a sound when you step in there?
Because that's
change that so that it doesn't play the sound when you step into the trigger, and it only plays the sound when you click the button. So that was okay. This one happens when you click the button. So that's what about here? Yeah, so this one has something in there that plays the sound. That's the button. That's the button is fine. When you walked in to the trigger, there was a sound that played, right? So which one of these things? That one. So right now you have it set up so it's playing a sound when you walk into the trigger, which is not really what you want. So I would disable that or delete it. And maybe change the size of that button. It's pretty huge. Change the width and height of that. Yeah.
So like, if it's acting like that, it goes on here is fine, like, yeah, walk away.
Cool. Because that works. Click, and it doesn't go back, right?
Yeah.
So you only need one transition out of it. When you're done playing the sound, you just want to go back. So I think you don't need either of those transitions. I would delete both of them. You actually have to right click the deletion to basically delete that guy, delete that guy. And I want you to add a new transition that is just finish. Yeah. And then connect that one back to here. And I don't think you actually need a button in this state. So right now, this one, all it should do is play a sound. It shouldn't need to show a button. That'd be fine. That works. Cool. That works.
I didn't know you were gonna click finish.
Yeah. All right. Oh, you're so close. Wait, it's working, right?
No. It will go through the whole thing, it just won't play a sound with it. Like, so I'll go here,
Well,
and the button
well,
shows up,
when
and
is
then
it
I click
supposed
the
to play
button,
the sound?
and it says that it's going there.
Cool. What does that state do?
It's supposed to play the sound.
Yes.
No, you want the blue version sound when you press the button, right?
So it's there, but it just won't play.
Put some there, owner. So show me that again. So go ahead and play.
No, walk into the trigger and then stop. See how the button shows up?
No, just button.
You click it?
What? No,
Click
it
when you-
didn't play.
It was too quiet.
Yeah.
I bet you what it is he's playing from like
That's what I want.
underneath the ground.
Okay.
So something you
what
can do
control,
is
like,
stop playing.
controls
Show me
the-
where that tube is.
that button?
Is it like?
It's on top of.
You're right. Okay.
So you got that right.
Oh, but
So-
that's where
There's
you're
actually
actually way
a button, right?
underneath the world right now.
And then
I think I know what's going on. Because you
That's
didn't
the sound
specify a
effect.
position,
It's
which is
sound.
totally fine. It's not like the wrong thing to do.
So-
It's playing it at 0, 0, 0.
So it's like up here.
Yeah, it's like way.
I was wondering why I
So you
fell
see
through
how,
the
like,
floor a while back
when
when I had a plane.
you got the transition sound,
Yeah, that's fine.
they'll send that event to this to play the sound. And then when it's done, it just goes back. So that's why I tweaked the message, because all it is just it
I will
sends that
show you.
message, and then when it's done,
I can show you right
playing
now
that
how to
sound,
change that
it goes
position.
back.
So go to your
It's done.
cue. You want to play it from the position of the trigger. So this position right here, right now, just change that and specify like that position. I think so. Maybe 28. 0 is fine there. And maybe see if that sounds better. It's been really quiet for some reason.
I turned my volume, did I? That was.
No, I don't feel like that was easy.
felt like it
Is the
was
volume of that play sound actually maybe a little bit less than let's find that one. I feel like you did everything right, so just leave it at that. All right, so you guys now know how to have a button inside a trigger volume that plays a sound. Cool? You guys good? All right. I'm going to show you one more thing that you're going to need for homework. You're going to need to use triggers for homework, by the way. So if you didn't already, then you should make sure that you understand that and ask questions if you're not sure.
I'm going to show you how to, this is a super simple state. It's like one state and one action to display time. But this is not something that you're going to do like a lot, so I'm okay if you guys just like watch the video and cut to the end and just get this part. But I'll show you how to display a label on screen that just displays the time. Okay. So we're going to add, you can add this to any of your existing objects. I'm going to make another new object just because I like to separate out things that are responsible for gameplay to different objects in my level. So let's just first, shoot, you know what? Okay, let's try to do this. I got like 15 minutes. We can do this. If we can't get to it, then we'll get to it next week. I'm going to add a new object called go_time manager. All right. And this is actually a good opportunity for me to show you some of the Playmaker additional functionality. So we're going to add a Playmaker component to this thing, all right, this time manager that I'm making. So make a empty game object and add a new FSM to it. And make sure your game isn't running like I was, because I'm a doofus. Yours was running too? Yeah. Like I said last week, it helps if you go into preferences, go to your colors, and change this thing to be something like bright pink, because you will not make that mistake when it's bright pink. OK, so go to my time manager. I'm going to add a new Playmaker FSM. And this is just going to be a single state. And all it's going to do is display time. So that's all I'm going to name this state. I'm going to call it the display time state. So let's start off with just a single action, which is going to lead me to a discussion of Playmaker variables. So if you search for time in the action browser for your new empty state, go ahead and open up the action browser and just search for time. You'll see a bunch of actions here. The one that we care about to display a timer in our game, or in your case, you may have like a time bomb or something else that like runs, something else that needs time or a running tally. Get time info is the thing that gives you like a variety of different things that you can use for your time. All right, so go ahead and add one of these guys to your scene. Get time info has a drop-down box allowing you to pick a variety of different time events that you care about. What's that? What is delta time? Yeah. That's how much time has passed since the last render frame. So this is really tiny. It's useful for a lot of things, though. But what we care about for the game, for the homework, is time since level load. All right? Time since level load is basically from the minute that the level finished loading, or from the instant that the level finished loading. This is how much time has passed in seconds. All right? Cool. The second value is store value. What does store value mean? Well, get time info is going to give you the time since the level has been loaded. But it wants you to use that value and save it. OK? So we're going to talk about variables here. And at any time that I'm talking about this stuff, if you guys feel like I'm going too fast, just stop me, and I will stop and go back. And Sam, you already know about variables. For the other guys, just bear with me, OK? So variables in Playmaker are a really, really common thing. They're so common that they have their own tab up at the top here, right? Variables. They look just like events as far as like adding them. But variables serve a very different purpose from events. Events, when you add them, they describe something that happened, like player entered the volume, or like I clicked the button. Variables in Playmaker allow you to save and store information. Information can be anything. It can be a number, like in the case of time. It can be like a color. It can be a position. It can be text, like a series of characters. It can be any of these things. That's what a variable can do. A variable, like think of it like a bucket. Like you have a bucket. Every variable is a bucket. You can put something inside the bucket, just like you can take the variable and you can put something inside of it. You can look at the contents of that bucket. The bucket can be either empty or it can have something in it, right? Like in this case, I can have a variable that represents a number, and you can either have a number or it doesn't. You can change the stuff that's inside variables, just like you can change stuff inside of a bucket. A bucket can hold one thing. You can take stuff outside of it and put something else into it. You can replace those things, right? Just the same thing with variables. A variable basically holds one piece of information, and you choose what goes inside that bucket or take it out or look inside of it, okay? Does that make sense, you guys? That's what variables are. They're basically buckets that let you store data. So this action, getTimeInfo, is asking you for a variable that it can store the time in. So in order for us to provide it a variable, a bucket that it can store time in, we need to make one by going to the Variables tab here. All right. So I want you to go to Variables. I want you to add a new variable called time. And the type of this bucket, because you have to tell it whether it stores numbers or letters or positions, is just going to be float. So go ahead and add one, and you'll see it show up. Don't worry about any of the other properties yet. These are just default values, tooltips. You're not really going to be using those yet. But now I've added a time variable. Go back to your state. When you click on this drop-down box, you'll see that your time variable is present. Okay? You should see time show up here. Cool? The third item in this getTimeInfo is a checkbox that asks, do you want me to give you this time every frame? Which means, do you want me to tell you what time it is constantly? Or do you want me to just tell you what time it is once and then never again? Okay? In our case, for our race game, we want it to tell us every frame what the time is. So also at this point, it's helpful to know whether you did it right or not. So there's a checkbox here called debug, which is going to be really helpful for you. I want you guys to click on this. When you click on this debug checkbox, a little box shows up underneath your store value. This is going to show you, while the game is running, what your bucket holds, what your variable for time holds. All right? So I want you to show debug, make sure that's set up, and then just press play. What you should see in your game is that number climbing up. Okay? That is basically the time since the level has loaded, and that number is going up. All right? Everyone got this? Everyone sees this time going up? So what we're going to do is take this bucket, which holds the time, and spit it out to be on screen in a label. Okay? We're going to take the time that they give us, and we're just going to display it on screen in the corner. All right? Make sure you've added a variable. There's a tab for adding variables. Yeah. And at the bottom, create one. Right? And then you can pick it in your store in your state. And I click the, yeah, and then play, make sure that number goes up. All right, we only need one more action to do this. We've already been using buttons. We could use a button. But in this case, we're going to use a GUI label. Labels are just non-interactive UI that display information. So we have this label. And if you just type something in here, like, I'm just going to type like garbage, just to show you that it's displaying text in my upper left corner. How do I get time to show up as text? What does my bucket currently hold? It's the time, right? What do we say it's holding? It's a number, all right? GUI labels do not know how to display numbers by themselves. It kind of sucks. It doesn't really know what you mean. It's expecting text. It wants text. It wants a number that you are converting to text for it. I can't pick a number here. So let's give it some text by converting time into text. All right? So how do we do this? In between getting the time and displaying the text, we are going to convert the number that represents time into text. Okay? They look exactly the same. Like when you play, what's weird is that like you'll play and you'll be like, oh, that's text right there. Why can't I just show that? No, that's a number. It's different. GUI labels don't know how to take this thing and spit it out for you. It needs help. So let's help it along. So go to your action browser. And if you just type convert, these are all the things that Playmaker can convert for you. And which one of these do you think is going to be appropriate for our case here? Float to string, right? We want to convert a float to a string. Cool. So I'm going to add one of those. This is where order is important. I want you to make sure that this convert float to string is happening in between getting the time and displaying the label. So just drag this guy until he's in between get time info and your label. All right? So this is what my state machine looks like right now. I get the time first. I will convert that to a string, and then I'm going to display that as a label. All right? So make sure it's in that order. Cool. Go to this action, and there are two fields it wants you to provide. One is the float that you're going to convert. So here we can just pick time. All right, we're going to pass it the bucket that we just filled in right before this happened. Right? The next is going to be the string that it wants to put the result into. This is basically now you need a second bucket to store the text that is converting for you. Okay? So go to variables. We're going to add a new variable again. We're going to name it time text. Make sure it's not a float. So before you click add, it's a string. All right? A string is just a string of characters. So time text is a string. Add that. Okay? Now go back to your state. This is now time text as your string variable. Cool. Every frame, this checkbox is here as well. We want this thing to happen every time. So click this checkbox as true as well. Every frame needs to be true, otherwise it's only going to do it once and then never again. So every frame is true. Then finally, and this is the last bit, go to your label. And how do we plug in a variable into text right here? Because I can type in stuff here. If you want to provide Playmaker actions with a bucket, like a variable that you want Playmaker to use, you want to click this button to the right here. This little button to the right of text, and pretty much every single Playmaker action lets you choose from a variable that you've created instead of typing something in. So when you click on that button, you should see time text here.
Can you make it show up as the standard time with the colon?
I will get into that next week. Yes, you can, but there's no point showing it now. I don't really care about that now anyway. It's just fine in seconds. So time text, make sure you pick that. Now when you play, I'm going to move this over a little bit so it's not quite in the middle. Now when you play, in-game, you should see a little text label that goes up as you're playing. Okay? And if you have the debug checkbox showing, you can see it in your Playmaker action window.
Okay, make it so that it will reach like 30 seconds, yeah?
Sure. But you have to research that on your own because I've run out of time. I will show you that. What's that? 5 minutes. I want to go over homework too. Everyone got this thing showing on screen?
Yeah.
Yeah? You guys got it? Okay. That's your first introduction to variables. We're going to be using a lot of variables in this class, okay? And there's a lot more to do. Cool. Let's go over homework.